All right, Dick, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can hear you. So we are recording. We have finally figured this out. We have attempted half a dozen times. For everyone watching, this is the famous spiritual Dick. This is how I start my book. This is the man that came up to me in the sauna and said, I feel like I've known you from a past life. Unfortunately, he didn't have clothes on at the time, but as you can see now, he does have clothes on. He's not in a sauna. We had to figure this out. We had to bring him over to the house, and he's on my phone while I'm on my laptop because his tablet is from the 80s and was not working. So, Dick, thank you for um, joining us today. How old are you now? 92?
Yes.
92, 92. And we wanted to get this on camera, on film, before you decided to jump to the other side. Um, and I'd really like to open up with that because that is a topic that does not scare you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And have we figured out what you're going to come back as when you pass away so that you can let me know that you are keeping an eye on me? Was it a hummingbird or
Yeah. We have talked about a hummingbird. I've had a couple of experiences with a hummingbird. When my brother died, I had a hummingbird when I was sitting out on my deck fly up and right next to my hands in my lap, and then circle my head a few times. Then another experience when I was talking to my deceased brother's wife, a hummingbird came up and about 6 or 7 inches from my face for just a second or two and then flew away. But birds are sent sometimes as messengers from the other side. I don't know if I really know what I'm talking about, but it was quite an experience.
I've actually had a few hummingbirds in the last couple of weeks that they come up to the window. Not only do they come up to the window, I've had a few come within inches of my face and just hover. It scared the shit out of me at first, but then as I calmed down, they would just sit there and stare at me. So I think we've got it on film. It is official, hummingbird. So when you jump to the other side, I'm going to need some questions answered. I'm going to have some things I want to check out with you. So you're going to need to come back as a hummingbird that can talk English. So we'll have to figure that out at another time.
Well, I'm not coming back as a hummingbird. I might come back as some kind of a symbology of a hummingbird, but I
Okay.
suspect they'd have to get permission to come back, and they might say, "There's no way you're going back." Do what they say.
Okay. So let's start at a very early age. I remember you telling me kind of early on when we first started talking about a decade ago that you used to see things as a young child, right? You would see kind of little elves jumping in and out of the walls, different dimensional beings.
Well, when I was about 2.5 years old, I was extremely afraid of the dark, and my mother put me to bed one night, and I asked her if she could open the door just a little bit to let some light in, and I was lying there on the bed and facing the wall. 4 or 5 of small little elves that looked just like the seven dwarfs in the movie came out of the wall, and then they just kind of danced around the floor for a few, went back into the wall, and then they came back out of the wall. And the next morning, I told my mother that I had seen some small people, and she said, "Oh, Richard, you were just dreaming." And then about 60 years later, I was listening to a fellow that was a member of the School of the Mysteries giving a talk, and he started talking about the elves. And he described those elves to a T, the kind of clothes they wore, the height they were, and etc. And I'd never talked to him about anything like this, but it kind of solidified in my mind that that was real and was not a dream.
This was at 2 years old, 2.5 years old. So you have memories that far back?
I have memories clear back when I was 6 months old. I
Six
can
months old, and what was happening
I
at
can
6 months?
remember nursing my mother. Wait a minute. Maybe it was 6 years old. No, it was 6 months.
Okay. So everyone now gets a gist of why the book has got so much dialogue of him and I back and forth, and that the constant breaking each other's balls is not a made up dialogue. So, 6 months, right? So as early back as 6 months, you vividly remember what was going on.
I
So you
can
had,
remember 9, 10 months when I was first starting to walk, and my mother's sister, my aunt, we were sitting there in a chair, and she's probably 6 or 8 feet away, and she says, come on, Richard, walk over here." I made a couple of wobbly steps and then fell on the floor and started crying, and been crying ever since.
yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. I picked you up today and you were crying. So when you have these memories of 6 months, 9 months, are you at nine? I know you're having the memories. So you're remembering that you took a couple steps forward and fell down and cried. When you're at 9 months, are you able to understand what your aunt's saying? Do you have a cognition of what's going on, or is this just because you now have a memory? Kind of like me looking back at a memory of four. At that time, I didn't know what someone was saying, but now I understand what they were doing.
Well, actually, I never thought about understanding what my aunt said, but I understood it completely. Her exact words were, "Come on, Richard, walk over here to me." My mother says, "Come on, Richard, walk over."
Hmm.
And she was holding me up. I was standing on my legs, and I turned to my aunt, took a couple of steps, but trying to think that what I understood the words that she was saying. I never even gave that a second thought.
Okay. I guess in a way, there's really no difference between, if everything is now, what's the difference between a memory of being 9 months or a memory of you talking about it as of right now? Um, what else was going on at an early age? Did you have other mystical experiences? Were you reading spiritual books at a very young age? If I remember correctly, you were raised Mormon, right?
Yes, I was. When I was 8 years old, I was baptized, and my dad said I had to start going to primary, which was at about 4:30. School let out at 4, and the church house where they had the ward house where they had primary was probably a half a mile away. I hated going to primary because I was always hungry about that time, and then had to spend a couple hours over there. But I'm not speaking disrespectful of organized religion, but for some reason, what I was taught just never made any sense to me. But I was so young that I couldn't argue with anybody. But uh, I lost my train of thought.
Well, let's put it this way. How old were you? If it didn't make sense, was it not making sense at a very young age of 8, 10 years old?
Well, at 8 years old, I don't know how to explain it, but when they were talking about certain things and the history of the church and etc., it just didn't make sense. But I never was too young to even know what made sense was. And as I grew older, and I always disliked going to church for some reason or another until I got a girlfriend in high school, and I loved going to church. That's where we would meet. But uh, I studied Mormonism, the LDS Church. I'm not a novice when it comes to church history. I taught the elders quorum for about 4 or 5 years, and I did my best to live the church teachings, but I never was good enough. I'd hear somebody give an inspirational talk in church, and I'd think to myself, well, I'm really going to try to work try to live righteous this week. And next Sunday I'd hear the talk and think, geez, just hard as I tried to live, I just wasn't good enough. So it was kind of discouraging. That went on until I was probably about 1987. We had an instructor. I used to go to the sports mall and play handball. They had a fellow come over and that was in the martial arts, and I thought, well, I'm going to ask him if I can join his class. And so next time I saw him, I asked him, and he says, well, before I let you join my class, you have to listen to a lecture on meditation. I said, what the hell for? And he says, because it'll make you a better person and a better martial artist. I thought, well, if it'll do that, I'll listen to it. So the fellow came up from Ogden and gave a talk on meditation, and it just really clicked with me. And so I joined the class, and so a month later, that same teacher came up to give another lecture to a new group of people, and I skipped class and went listen to that lecture. And I was so impressed that I got initiated into meditation, and I've been meditating 37 years as of the 11th of August this year, twice a day. First 20 minutes per time, and now I'm up to about an hour and a half, 2 hours per time, about 4 hours a day. And I'm grateful that I stuck with that. That's one of the things that I stuck with in my life, because most everything I would go to a certain point in life and then get disinterested and go to something else. I've always stuck with meditation, and it's paid big dividends.
Well, appreciate you talking about meditation and giving me the exact date and time and how many years, because I bring that up in the book a lot. So I'm glad you're proving me correct and that people reading the book will not think I'm making shit up. So I really enjoy that comment, especially August 11th, 37 years. So that is spot on. Um, you were, even when you were getting older, 20s, 30s, 40s, you were still pretty high up in the church, right? So when was it when you decided to just kind of diverge off and read other books and meditate and everything else? I knew it was 1987. Was that when everything changed for you?
Well, can't say I was high up in the church. I was in a teaching position, but nothing with authority.
Okay.
Uh,
When did you
I
start
want to, I
reading
want
the?
to make something perfectly clear. I'm not speaking disrespectful of anything. This fellow I used to listen to a lecture that had credibility that was unquestionable. And I remember one of his lectures, he said, there's no such thing as a bad religion, because that's where people are in their evolution. They have just as much right to be where they are as you have to be where you are. And that kind of straightened me out, because I used to get into arguments with people in the church. I had to stop doing that. Thank God I
Yeah,
did. Almost
yeah,
got in
you.
fights a couple of times.
I'm sure you did, especially on the handball court. I remember you and I talking about that. It's that same comment is like, we don't get mad at an 8-year-old for being in second grade. And we don't get mad at a 16-year-old for being in 10th grade. And that 10th grader is not better than the second grader. They're just at different parts of their evolutionary path. So that's a lot of that stuff that I learned came from you and Michael, and a few others. So that's always all of those metaphors, all of those quotes, all of those sayings, everything you've ever showed me or had me read about have always stuck with me. Um, when did you start reading different books? Like I think the first book you gave me was from Manly P. Hall. When did that shift?
I don't know exactly. I've always searched for knowledge. I had a hard time in school. I just learned 2 or 3 years ago that I was dyslexic. And I've kind of suspected that. I didn't know what dyslexic was, but my hardest time in school was trying to analyze everything to death. And I'd be on page 3 and the teachers be on page 15. So I'd always behind his lectures, but still trying to understand a little bit more than just the verbal verbiage of the lecture. But I've always read a lot of books. I started reading, got very interested in mathematics and formal mathematics and applied mathematics and true mathematics, pure mathematics, I should say, which I'm extremely interested in. I'll give you one little point of interest. I was studied the symbology and etc. of numbers. Each number has its own vibratory rate. And the number 10 has really fascinated me. And I thought, well, number 10, the square root of number 10 is 3.1623. And pi is really 3.1416. And I was reading the other day one of my math books, and the Japanese had used the square root of 10 as pi for over 500 years. That made me feel pretty good that I'd come up with something that somebody else had been using. But anyway, I love higher information. I started buying all the books that thought I'd be interested in. I've got quite a library of esoteric books. Epistemology. Epistemology is the science of nature and validity of knowledge. And epistemology comes from the epistles of Paul in the New Testament. Epistemology is not the study of pissing. It's higher information.
And what are you currently reading for the 100th time? Because I've always known you to get stuck on the Gita or Madame Blavatsky or the Hermetic principles. You like to continuously go over things time and time again and catch what you've missed. So what are you currently reading?
Well, I've had a book over about 25 years called the Impersonal Life, written by John Benner. And it's really a fascinating book. It really points out a lot of things that's not pointed out in other books, but I try to read the Bhagavad Gita every day, at least 3 or 4 pages. And then I just bought a book written by Walter Russell, who became one of the uh, top scientists in the nation with a 4th grade education. And the name of the book is The Secret of Light. Now, what I've read is everything in nature, the most smallest aspect of nature is a vibration. Scientists used to think it was an atom, a molecule, and so on up. But light is another word for vibration. And Walter Russell that book is really fascinating to me, may not be to others. And I've been reading The Voice of the Silence by Madame Blavatsky, Helena Pratovna Blavatsky. She's really a high evolved lady. She's dead. She's been deceased for several years, but she was associated with Jabal Kul, who was called a Tibetan master. And I read the other day where he has been in the same physical body for 264 years. And people say, how was that possible? Well, it's possible through certain aspects of life that most people don't understand, including me, but including I. But, you know, what I'm saying could be boring to most people, be a few people might be interested in it. But I studied aeronautical engineering in college, and I've always been fascinated with the thrust with the jet engine. And I've always thought, well, how do you transpose thrust to horsepower? And I'll bet I asked 50 engineers over a 30 or 40-year period. I never got an answer. I walked in the bookstore one day and I walked over in the science section. There's a book on physics. It was about 2 inches thick. And I started thumbing through and I stopped on a page and it says if an airplane puts out 3,000 horsepower and it's going 600 miles an hour, what's the 3,000 pounds of thrust? It's going 600 miles an hour. What is the horsepower? My gosh, that's what I've been looking for forever. So some of these things are manifest. They say that energy follows thought. If you've ever thought about your past life and what you've thought about and put a lot of energy in, it has really come to pass. But let's get into something that's interesting to people, not what's interesting to me.
Well,
I keep using me and I should use I.
the aeronautical stuff, I'm glad you brought that up as well, because that is the big part of the book of you continuously telling me about your piloting skills and how you lost the engine over the Great Salt Lake. So I'm glad you brought that up. Um, Back to Walter Russell, the book you're reading, The Secret of Light. That is the guy that you said he had a fourth grade education. That's the one. I think he had a spiritual experience for 39 or 49 days that he was downloaded all this information, very high level information that he proved in person to a lot of scientists that still thought he was crazy. He is also the guy that the big thing nowadays is the guy who was on Joe Rogan. I think I sent you that video. Talking about how everything was a vibration. I sent that video to you, the guy who was studying Walter Russell.
Yeah, he's a movie
The,
star. He's played a pretty good part in the Ray Charles movie. Played the saxophone. I can't think of his
yes.
name now either, but he's the one that, well, you're the one that put me on to Charlie Russell, but I think he's
Oh,
the one that put you on Charlie Russell.
yeah, the Walter Russell stuff is quite interesting. The guy on Joe Rogan did his best to regurgitate it. Some of the stuff is pretty interesting. Some of it might be off base. He's done some great debates with some very intelligent scientists to kind of flush things out. And I'm sure we'll remember his name. He's the guy in Hustle and Flow. I can't remember right now. He's the guy that says one times one is not one, it's two. So, but Walter Russell, getting getting that type of knowledge, that information from the horse's mouth, he's got some amazing books that just a different level. He's the guy that Tesla read his book and said, this is spot on, but you need to go lock this book away. Humanity is not ready for it for another 1,000 years. And I believe he's also the guy that the Vatican came to him and said, please don't publish this book. There's too much information, too much knowledge that the masses are not ready for. So he's a very intelligent individual. Talked about the sauna, how we met, um, books you're reading right now, the mathematics you enjoy, the planes you love to fly. Used to be a pilot. Um, we could go into your war stories, but you had some notes that you brought out. You always carry in your pocket, in that pocket protector that you always have. What were the notes that you had on that paper? What other things did you want to discuss?
Well, they're just little philosophical sayings that I keep around just to remind myself. I ask a lot of people, I used to wonder, what's the definition of philosophy? And I read once for philo, and I think Greek, I might be wrong, means gosh, now I lost my train of thought. Sophia. Philo means love. Sophia means knowledge. So philosophy means the love of knowledge. And I've always been extremely interested in philosophy. But I just know a few little sayings in it, and I can't remember them right now.
What you're still meditating every day, right? You're still doing your morning and afternoon sessions, and I believe
Yes,
anywhere from
twice a
30
day.
minutes to an hour and a half, twice a day. And you have also experienced, you've done some calls with Patrick about using the Shaktipat to increase your LOC, your level of consciousness. I know you've done that. Um, and I also remember you saying that the reason you read these books so many times is because you you really want to come back in your next life as a teacher, correct? You want to hit the ground running and start helping a lot of people with this higher level knowledge.
Yes, I've done a lot of teaching in my life. Uh, yeah, say something and I lose my train of thought. But,
That's
I
okay.
remember one
Okay, you're old.
in Manly P. Hall, the book's Self Unfoldment, the one that I gave you, the first book.
Yep.
It says, "Be patient and in all things be kind. Then nature will be patient and kind through you." And that's always really interested me. And he goes on to say, "Be in accord with all life, not just some life." You have on my deck, I put out some peanuts for the squirrels, and now the squirrels are coming around. Some little white and dark birds about the same size as a sparrow, but a little bit smaller. They come and grab a peanut and fly up into the tree and lock it in their feet, and then they pick it out, pick it, and eat it. Now they're taking more peanuts than the squirrels. Cost me about $4 a month to feed those birds, squirrels. But anyway,
Have you had to have you had to have some meetings
had
between the
what?
squirrels and the birds to kind of keep the peace? Have you been keeping the peace
Had
between the
some
birds and the
meetings with them.
squirrels? Do you have the ability? Yeah. Have you been keeping the peace?
Well, you don't have to keep peace. They pick up on the vibration. There's, you know, they're starting to come around a little bit and be closer to me. I had one squirrel jump off of the deck railing into my lap when I was meditating. Kind of gave me a little bit of a shock for a second, but anyway, Charlie, I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's when we start talking about the higher things, uh, most people will say, "Well, I don't believe that," and then they just let it go by, and that's the end of it. But when I listen to things, I'm a little bit different than most. Going through grade school, I was always in the dumb class. I've had about 20 years, 20 some odd years of education, formal education, and not once have I ever gotten an A. Not once. 20, all those years. Now, I've gotten 100% on some tests, but they weren't graded. They were just pass or fail tests. Got 100% on the ground school test. I got 100% on my real estate test. I got 100% on, I got 99% on the test I'd taken in the Army. But in the 8th grade, we had a fellow named, well, he, not just the 8th grade, but I remember specifically the 8th grade. The teacher had on his left the smartest student, and go back, and there were only 22 of us in the class. And there was only one person behind me, and that was Clyde Maybe. And he never missed school, but he never said anything in school. So the teachers would just leave him alone. They just figured he was stupid. But we had a 10-year class reunion years ago. Clyde Maybe could have bought anybody in that class. I mean, yeah, just the way things work out, and you think back to the way the students are taught. One size fits all kind of a philosophy. I think that's
Yeah,
kind of changing now, but anyway.
yeah, that is luckily changing. The education system is changing. It's been built off the Industrial Revolution and just creating mindless employees to take care of those large organizations. But that is shifting. A lot of private schools, a lot of charter schools that are changing things up. So that's good. I have a question for you. What is consciousness? How would you describe consciousness?
Consciousness is one of those words that's unutterable, nameless, like most esoteric words are, but consciousness is, on the physical level, is, my definition, is the ability to understand and cognize things on a higher level. It's like truth. People have been asking, what's truth? My definition of truth is that which does not change. Well, Richard, what doesn't change? Well, nothing in the absolute changes, but everything in the relative changes. They say that the relative is ever changing and the absolute is never changing. So that's just because but when you say something never changes, you still don't know what truth is. But there's absolute truth and there's relative truth. Now, relative truth, as they say, is the truth of the day. Things change. It was true 100 and some odd years ago the man couldn't fly. Well, now they can fly, so that truth has changed. And when I was younger, I mean, somebody taught, I remember the wristwatch that you had on your, years ago, on your wrist was full of knowledge and information set, and everybody thought that was just stupid, but now it's just common. I read a book several years ago that the Dow Jones would eventually reach 3,000. At that time, it was about 800 or 900. My gosh, that's stupid. Now it's up to 30,000, almost. Sometimes a little higher.
It's actually up to 40.
40? Really? Well,
Mhm.
I don't keep track of it like I used to.
Okay, well, you've answered consciousness, and then you went right into my last question, which is what is truth? So that pretty much sums it up. Um, I know you didn't want this to be too long, so is there anything else you would like people to know? Is there something specific that you think is very valuable to people listening?
Well, what's really valuable is for persons to start understanding that life moves in circles. And that's hard to explain, but things grow. I mean, the plants grow. There are 4 levels of consciousness: the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the human kingdom. Then there's a 5th level called the superhuman kingdom, and that's when you reach cosmic consciousness and up to God consciousness. I don't know, maybe I better not bring some of these things up. It just upsets people, but and that's about all I have, Charlie. My mind is not working like it used to. So,
You don't want to expand? You won't offend anybody.
well, I do, but I don't know what to expand on. I could say some things that God says, I am in you, as the great oak is in the acorn. Now, that gives you something to think about if you want to think. Some people don't want to think. Another thing is the people on TV are saying people need to wake up. We need to wake up. It's impossible to wake up yet. You wake up in slow, direct information. But if you woke up all of a sudden, it would fry your nervous system. Well, you have to wake up, but everybody will wake up. The scriptures say that there's an old saying that says, there are many paths that lead to me. Which path may be, I care not, just so they come. But until the last is gathered in, I shall wait. Now that is one of the indications that every single human being will get back to God with divine mind. Divine means without error. Righteousness means right action. And nobody gets through this life without making mistakes. So you could really say there's no such a thing as mistake, because a mistake is something that affords your evolution. We all, I keep referring to the fellow who used to listen to lecture. He says that, well, I can't think what I was going to say. Yeah.
Well, you're 92. You're doing great. We will, that's, you said you'd only be about 10 to 15 minutes. So we've actually done about 40. So we'll wrap it up there. You've already answered questions about consciousness, about truth. You gave us some great understanding of books, some great knowledge on consciousness and meditation. What we'll do is we'll just get this edited up, cleaned up, and get it out to the world. And then we will make sure that when you come back, you're a hummingbird. I do want you to come back. I do want to keep crossing your paths. When you get to the other side, I'm going to need some help with some questions I have. So don't forget about that. And if you have to ask permission, like you said, just make sure you push. Don't let them say no.
Well, there's one other thing I want to say is I'm actually looking forward to going to the other side. Now, what I've read is we can come back in as early as 60 days, but probably a year or two. Normally, it's up around 400 years from what I've read. But if a person has a real desire to come back and be a teacher, then that desire is fulfilled. In fact, most people who come back with extra abilities have the desire to come back that way, and those desires are fulfilled. And there is more than one life. And we come back, it's like going through grade school, high school, college. You go to class for so many months, then you're out for a rest for so many months, then you come back to a higher class. That's basically the way life is. We keep coming back until we get to the level that's called God or cosmic consciousness, and then we don't have to come back, but we can come back if you want to. If you don't come back, you go on to higher things. If you come back, then you still go on to higher things, but you were able to teach and help mankind. And that's my main desire.
Well, that's a perfect way to end it. I'm glad you're still here with us. Thank you for coming up to me in the sauna. I wish you would have had clothes on, but that didn't matter. That doesn't matter right now.
We should get
Uh,
off those clothes because I don't remember it that way.
I'm sure you don't. You're 92. So, um, thank you, man, for everything that you've taught me, every book you've had me read, the people you've introduced me to. Thanks for finally getting this figured out. Thanks for answering the questions, and we'll end it there. Dick, I appreciate everything you've done for me, man, and we will talk to you shortly.
Well, thank you, Charlie.